Keir Starmer's been on about smashing the gangs and stopping the boats for however long. He's not done anything. He's a gaslighter. And he lies. We've just got an open border policy. Walking literally off a boat, into a coach, straight to a hotel, getting fed, getting clothed, phones, everything. Where's it stopped? Where are the people that really need the help? You look at every sort of section of society within the UK, I feel like we're being demolished. We're being overrun with mass immigration. Do believe that the next general election is our last point to turn things around. I don't even think we've fully broken. We're at breaking point yet. I don't want to use the word anarchy. I don't think anyone's happy with the current government. The Greens used to be about, recycling, looking after the trees. What happened to the tree huggers? They've turned into mentalists.
What happens if, God forbid, we have another Southport incident?
I think if we saw something like that happen again, that will definitely explode the country, no matter what Starmer says.
Reform seems to be the party of choice for many people now. How do you feel about them and Nigel Farage?
Right.
Welcome to the Daily Expresso. Now today there's no flashy Westminster politicians, there's no political pundits. Today we're talking to Martin Gauci, normal, average guy. He goes to protests, he films them, he loves the country and he wants to have his opinion heard. So, Martin, thanks for coming in today, mate.
Thank you very much for having me.
First
really
question. When you look at Britain today, what worries you most?
I just think that at the moment, the way that, especially more so over the last year, I think we've gradually in so much decline. For me personally, I just worry about my children and their future. I mean, I remember, and I'm sure you probably do remember back in the time back in the UK when it was like a good place to be. The culture, everything about opportunity, being prosperous, the chance for family to, go out, work, have children, buy a house, have a car, go on holiday a few times a year. I just think we are under so much pressure now. The UK is in such a bad state that, especially for my children's future, just the way everything is going, you look at every sort of section of society within the UK, I feel like we're being demolished, whether that's the culture, the education system, the welfare system, everything like that. We're being, I think we're being overrun with mass immigration, legal and illegal. I think we need to look at that. So there's many aspects of that I think are having a massive effect on our children's futures.
What do you think's changed most in Britain over the last, let's say, 10 years, over the last decade? What do you think's changed the most? Because I think when I was a kid growing up, I thought the country was great, but my parents would have probably said it's a struggle, it's a slog.
Yeah.
I mean, they're working loads of jobs to put meat on the table. I feel like now we look back and we're nostalgic about a time when perhaps people were still moaning and saying, country's gone to the dogs, ain't what it used to be.
Yeah, I do too agree. I mean, I'm going to go on about immigration probably quite a bit, but I think that is one of the biggest keys that are driving, whether you're looking at the labour market, whether it's driving down the cost of, wages and, driving up the cost of living. Look at the affordability of a house, for instance. Everything is so out of sync, like going to the pub for a night out, to buy a round of drinks between 3 or 4 of you, even in like a local village pub, this excluding London, you're still looking at £30-40 or whatever it may be for a pint just to go and do day-to-day things. I think that society's changed so much. And like I say, going back to my first point, I don't think, for me, and I'm not just the only one, and I'll probably speak on behalf of a lot of people in the UK. I don't think we're asking for much, but I think because of the government that we've currently got, and by the way, I'm not excusing the previous government, because obviously I would blame the previous Tories that have been in power for the previous 14 years, that literally sat on their backsides and done absolutely nothing. And in that period of time, we've gone into decline. I just think that in the last 16 months since Labour have come in, he's done what he said he was going to do. He said he's going to, do things harder and faster, and that's what he's done to the country. He's just driven it into the ground completely, whatever way you look at it. And there's no coming back from that. And my fear is that we've got to wait another 3 years at least to 2029 to the next general election. And if he's done what he's done in the first 16 months, what are we going to be like when it comes to that point? Is it going to be too late? Because I do believe that the next general election is our last point to turn things around. Whether you agree with the mass immigration policies of people or not, or parties, that's apart from that, look at everything else that he's done. Do you know what I mean? And he's made all these U-turns and the more worrying thing is, let's say we get to the May local elections, and let's say that puts him under a lot of pressure, and he decides that he's going to resign. Who's going to take over that post? It's not going to be anyone any better, because he's got that whole Labour cabinet. They're so, let's say, inadequate. I can call them a lot of things, but from my point of view, unless there's going to be a vote of no confidence within the government, and that then we see like a turnaround where we get to have a general election early. That could be the case, but there's what are the answers? That's why that's why people have been protesting. Especially since last year, where people are getting fed up. I think British people have been very, very tolerant over the last 20, 30 years. And I think we've been taught that as part of British culture.
Yeah.
Maybe it's our own downfall because we have, and then we've got to that point. But I don't even think we've fully broken. We're at breaking point yet because, there could come a point maybe this summer. There could be even more, I don't want to use the word anarchy. Is that the right word?
Yeah,
Civil
yeah.
unrest. Do you know what I mean? On the streets, because I've never known a time where there's protests literally like every day, if not every week. And there's someone protesting about something, whether you support the left or the right. I don't think anyone's happy with the current government.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with that. But let's say Labour miraculously sort out the immigration problem, both legal and illegal. That's not going to bring down the price of beers in the local pub, is it? That's not.
No.
It's not going to change the cost of living. We're still going to be paying too much for our energy bills. We're still going to be struggling to buy a house.
No, exactly. I mean, even with energy, we got these this thing about net zero. We're dead set on this net zero thing. Why? What does the UK contribute to the O2 emissions around the world when you look at the likes of
little.
Very little when you look at, say, China, for instance.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we should support the environment. That's what the Green Party used to be about, for instance.
Yeah.
The Greens used to be about recycling, looking after the trees. What happened to the tree huggers? They've turned into mentalists. Like they've literally turned. They've turned into this like the party of like serious health conditions. I don't know what's wrong with them. Sorry, mate, but it's true. I do not know what's happened to them, for instance. And so yeah, you are right. But it's like it all comes down to if you want to look at the very big picture, like of the global agenda, the WEF. We look at what goes on at Davos and things like that. All this money being pumped in to drive certain ideologies and narratives. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
But even though I agree with all of that, we've got to start on the ground level as well. It's sort of both. We've got to sort of bite the head off at both ends. Do you know what I mean? We've just got to, we've got to meet. We've got to come and start doing something. But the problem is, nothing's happening. Nothing has happened. I don't think this government have done one thing that any person can say that they've enjoyed or they like. I mean, he'll go on about free breakfast clubs, for instance. I think he mentions that in every single speech that he does. But is it though? Because you might argue, okay, there are children out there that come from backgrounds or families that are in poverty, for instance. But all you're doing is taking a parenting away from that's how I see it. If you're going to support the family so they can support themselves. But you're not. You're just giving them the solution. You're putting a sticky plaster over the problem. And that's all you're doing. Then what happens is that they become reliant upon the government. Oh, this government's going to do really well for me. Then it all becomes part of that narrative where you're just doing something to support a certain voting bloc. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. So, Mike, for people who don't know you, who are you? What do you do? What's your day to day?
Name's obviously Martin Gauci. Born and bred in London. My mum's Irish. My dad was born and bred here, all born in London, but he's family from Malta. So if you want to class me as a third generation migrant,
okay. So Irish and Maltese.
Irish and Maltese background,
okay.
mate. But even with that, like I've always been brought up supporting England. So I was just classed myself as English. But now that I'm a bit older now, and I've got 3 kids and I can reevaluate. I'm happy to say that I'm British. If people don't want to call me English, then that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. Because you would probably class me on the right side of politics.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to, but I'm here to, like anyone else, here to contribute. We've all paid our taxes, mortgages, we've all paid our bills. And yet when we see all our taxpayers' money not being reinvested back into us, the people that have contributed towards the country, that's where we're having a problem with it. But just in terms of day-to-day stuff, so I've done like multiple jobs, like I said to you previously, like I left school at 16, got an apprenticeship. I worked in print for about 15, 20 years, worked in London for on and off for quite a number of years. I've then moved out of London. I've then worked in other jobs, like as engineers, done like service engineering. Then I've come back into London. I've worked as a VFX, an FX broker, so worked in foreign exchange and things like that. So I've done that for quite a few years. And then I've gone out of that. I've worked with children in care, which is what I currently do. I do support work on and off, so I do that as like self-employed. So I feel that I've been through a divorce, I've been through separation, I've got 3 children. So I feel like, and I've got got different groups of circles of friends. So I feel like I've got a bit of a rounded knowledge of like everything and like see society from different points of view.
Yeah.
And everyone is like pretty much saying the same thing. Everyone is just fed up.
Yeah.
If you look at people at the top, say earning the high earners, they're getting penalised. They're getting taxed to the nines. We've seen how many millionaires from left the UK. These are people that own companies. These are people that employ people, that take people on, that give people opportunities.
Yeah.
These are we're eradicating. We're erasing that. We're becoming such a over-reliant country on welfare that it's not sustainable. And then if you add the mass immigration on top of that, at what point does it stop? At what point do we all become a welfare state?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, how did you get into filming protests and being like a citizen journalist?
So that was just me. I was literally, the actual story was I was in bed ill for about 3 weeks. I couldn't move.
Yeah.
I had nothing else to do. I couldn't watch TV or anything. So I just jumped onto X, social media platform. I've never really I've been on X, but I've never really sort of explored. I think I was just a bit fed up with everything that had been going on at the time in the UK, especially with Labour not long being in. And going on a lot of X spaces, speaking to a lot of people day in, day out. And the great thing about that sort of platform is that you can speak to anyone from any walk of life with any opinion. You can debate them, you can chat to them from all over the country. So you get an idea. You can sort of start shaping people's views from all over in such a short space of time.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of having free speech and platforms like that. And then come summertime, we was all talking. We was getting to that point where we thought, you know what, we're doing enough talking on spaces. And then we had the incident that happened outside the Bell, at the Bell Hotel in Epping.
Yeah.
With Hadush Kabata, where obviously sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And that was like the breaking point. And, probably a lot of people remember that was probably the spark within the whole of the UK, that sparked protest up and down the country. And that obviously became worldwide. You had the likes of like Elon Musk on top of it, and people were talking about that everywhere. And so from that point, I went down there. I thought, I've had enough. So I went down there literally from the first protest, and just got my phone out and just started filming. Just started filming what was going on, filming the behaviour of the police. And then we had protests where we had anti-protesters coming down, or counter-protesters, filming them, seeing how they react. 2 different worlds between people that protest about what they actually care about, to a counter-protest who I believe are just there to agitate the protest and to agitate the police in order to. And I've seen it firsthand. I've seen this whole thing about 2-tier policing. I've seen it. I've seen it all.
But I've been down to one of these protests before, and I've seen plenty of guys like yourself and guys that I know who are just down there saying we don't want these undocumented men at this base near to these schools in our little small villages. But I see some people from both sides going down there just for a ruckus. I've seen guys there who are masked up, beer cans in hand, chanting St. George songs, and they're going in and attacking the police, launching fireworks, throwing eggs at the coppers, smashing police cars. And I'm seeing, I'll label them Antifa, I suppose, people who perhaps are supporters of Antifa, equally balaclavaed up with their hope not hate signs and everything else, but yeah, causing issues.
Yeah, I mean, no one condones any sort of that type of behaviour, right? But again, it depends if you're watching mainstream media, like where you're watching the footage.
Like this.
where you're watching the footage, because the beauty about doing citizen journalism, we go live. So even if I put up a clip, say 4 or 5 minutes, right? Anyone can go and watch the whole live stream from start to finish and see for themselves. They can go to other citizen journalists there at the same time and get different angles from start to finish. Unfortunately, you don't see that with the mainstream media. But but just in regards to what you were saying, yeah, I mean, in terms of them protests as well, police did have things in place like Section 60 AA, which is like no face masks and stuff like that. And the people that were like, I wouldn't call them organised, but obviously, some people got to take the lead in some way. People were there, and I was witnessed it, saying, "Look, take your masks off. Can't do this, can't do that." But unfortunately, also there are people planted within them protests to cause aggravation, whether they're from the left or from the right. There are people planted in there as well. So 99% of the people are there to protest because they do. All we do is care about young women and girls. At the end of the day, like you said, these are men that are undocumented, unvetted. They might be fine, but it only takes one of them, which it did, out of that hotel. Out of the 138 that had that were there, it only took one. Well, there was actually two people because there was another one arrested for assaulting staff and assaulting another migrant at the hotel.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying, that's all it takes. And why should we have any of them? One, we don't need any. Because we don't know who they are. We can't verify them. So and if anyone that knows Epping, like I do, it's such a it's a nice affluent little town, like suburb, whatever you want to call it. Never any trouble. You'd never ever think that sort of place would be put on the map.
Yeah.
The way it has done in the media. And then it goes, and it's the same for places like Crowborough. Even though I've not been to Crowborough, but I know I've stuck, I've tried to keep my, close to that story as well. They're dumping. They haven't dumped them all in there yet. I say use the term dump, but that's the way I see it. When you've got a village or a town or a small town that's around I think it's about 1,200 people, and you're looking to put say 500 to 800 men. I say men because they pretty much 99% of them are. That you're putting these people into a community like a small community is. That is going to have an instant impact, regardless, good or bad, whatever way you want to call it. It's going to have a massive impact, and it's not fair on the locals. Why should they?
Yeah.
That's why we've seen like the likes of Shabana Mahmood come out and go, oh yeah, we're going to end the use of hotels, but that's because you're either using Operation Scatter, putting them in HMOs, or you're putting them into army camps and stuff like that. It doesn't remove the problem.
So what would you prefer to happen?
Not them, just don't come here. We need to stop the actual boats. I mean, Keir Starmer's been on about smashing the gangs and stopping the boats for however long. He's not done anything. One in, one out scheme, but it's more like one out, two in. Whatever way you want to call it. The stats for him under him of 60 odd thousand small boat, and people forget. I know we're talking about illegal migration because they are they are quite a big threat. But we forget about legal migration. We forget about people that come over on visas and they expire. Did you know that after they're expired, if they get told to go home and they don't, nothing happens. Nothing happens to them. They don't just go, okay, I better go back home now. They disappear off the face of the earth. When you look at census of people, the way that people measuring the population of the UK, there's probably around 85 million people in the UK. When they're looking at stats regards to shopping patterns and stuff like that. Yeah. So this whole thing that there's 65 million, whatever it was, the latest census was. People can do their own research. But what I'm saying is like the headlines will always be about the illegal migration, and that is a focus. And I think if we can deal with migration as a whole, and because we've just got an open border policy. We see guys, we see citizen journalists, we see guys filming them, walking literally off a boat, into a coach, straight to a hotel, getting fed, getting clothed, phones, everything. They're getting, gym memberships, they're getting made football teams down at Braintree. RAF's Wethersfield FC. You've got ITV doing a documentary about it. Like, come on, do you know what I'm saying? It's like, where's it stop? Where are the people that really need the help? So
let's say tomorrow, Shabana Mahmood, we leave the ECHR or something like that, and we get rid of every asylum seeker that's in the country right now. All the hotels are emptied, HMOs emptied, army bases emptied. You think the government, no matter which government it is, you think they're going to say, okay, homeless people, army veterans, British families that are struggling to pay bills, we're going to now put you in these places, or we're going to give you the money we're giving to these people instead? Because I don't think that's going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. It's in all honesty, when you start looking at the people that are making money out of these contracts, the likes of Serco, Clear Springs, when you see like Care for Calais, for instance, the so-called charities, all these NGOs, right? It's a big gravy train. Look how much money we've paid to France. Over in excess of 400 million. Is it per year or the last 2 years? It might even be that or double. To stop boats. What have they done? They've not only just not stopped them, they've actually encouraged them to go over.
Yeah.
I've seen and spoke to people that have done citizen journalism in Calais. I've seen people that have done documentaries. I've got footage of people that have slept amongst them for 2 weeks in the camps. And the French police and the French authorities are all part of the problem. So when people argue, well, they've got no safe place to come, they've got no safe routes. Well, they come through 7 countries to get here in the first place. Yeah. What's wrong with France? It's not. It's this one big gravy train. The whole lot. It's like massively infiltrated, and that won't stop. Because why would we help homeless vets? Why? Who benefits from that? Apart from the veterans. That's what we want. That's where we want our taxpayers' money to go to. But the government won't because there's no money in it for them. And it all might sound a little bit, because just for your viewers, whatever, but they can go and do the research, go and look up. There's so much research out there.
What happens if, God forbid, we have another Southport incident where someone goes and does some heinous act and they scream Allahu Akbar, or they're saying they're doing this for Islamic Republic? What do you think's going to happen to the country then?
I think if we saw something like that happen again, that will definitely explode the country, no matter what Starmer says called about the far right and this, that and the other. Because it is normal people. When he calls people, it's like when people from the far right getting called racist. It's just water off a duck's back. It's not. How's it racist to care about women and children, no matter what colour you are? Yeah, that's all it's about. But I do think that would spark something. I mean, we've had a few close incidents. I know there was that. There was the hoax that went round. Was it yesterday in Liverpool about the guy who was he put a hoax that he put some bombs around some schools and stuff like that. Right. Don't know whether he'd been arrested or not, because you've got to be careful about what the misinformation and stuff like that. But there's been a few close shaves. Look at what happened in Glasgow last week. The guy walking around with two knives, just walking around like minding his own business with two like machetes in his hand. Yeah. Then goes into his block of flats, but he attacks the concierge there, and he's 23. No way in that month of Sundays that guy 23 years old. Yeah. It's like in the police. Obviously, there's obviously more to it, but we're just allowing these people to roam the streets. How can people feel safe? Do
you think Starmer understands working class people?
No. This is the son of the toolmaker who claims to be working class, right?
Yeah.
And he's if we want to talk about Starmer, right? He is the most despised man or PM, whatever you want to call it, that this country has ever seen in the history of politicians. I don't think anyone, whether you're left or right, have despised anyone more than him. Yeah. Because he's not only has he sat on the fence and done X amount of U-turns, he's a gaslighter, and he lies. Like I don't know how someone can sit there with a straight face. But yet again, going back to the earlier point, I don't think he's like Teflon. Like nothing sticks to him. I don't think you're ever gonna get his backside out of number 10 because he's that adamant about staying in that position. Some people say it's not a bad thing because keep him in there until 2029, then we'll definitely get rid of him because if he is replaced, who is he going to be replaced by? Yeah, he might be replaced by someone who's a little bit more intelligent than him.
Angela Rayner would be a good
shout. David Lammy, David Lammy, for instance. I don't think he covered himself in glory on Mastermind. Let's put it that way. He thinks Cyprus is a part of NATO.
Yeah.
This is what we're dealing with, and he's the Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, do you feel like Westminster as a whole listens to the average man like yourself?
No, I don't think they do. I think it's a cultural thing. That's why I think there's a parties coming in that are trying to change the way, I would call it like an institution, the way that it's run, because you do need people that have come from grassroots, but then at the same time, if you look at, and to be fair to politicians, if you're a company owner, if you own a company and you employ say 100 people, you've got a very successful business, and you're worried about the state of the country, you'd probably make an ideal MP. But why would you give up what you're turning over to become an MP for such little money? The incentive just doesn't make any sense. So it's one of them. But I do think like people do from grassroots level have to start getting themselves into politics. It's when you look at it, all comes down to the education system. When you look at how, then that's another. If you want to talk about indoctrination of the kids, what we're being told, like what we're being told what to believe and what not to believe. Yeah. The whole thing, like why aren't children or teenagers being taught more about politics, like real life politics, not like a curriculum about this is what politics is. Teach them things like life skills, teach them about journalism, teach them about social media, all the things that you can actually use. Yeah. But I do think the whole institution in Parliament needs, some people say, do we look at direct democracy? I'm still on the fence with that one because it's one of them where you be careful what you wish for. Yeah. Then you look at the voting system as well. It ultimately always just comes down to votes. It's almost like the lead up to a general election. It's always like people generally. I'm probably more into it than most because I've been sort of involved in the last year or so. Yeah. But generally, most people, your average working class person, doesn't really care about politics. They just want to go to work. They want to pay their bills. Something comes up in the news. Oh God, we've got to pay extra for that. Or they'll only worry about politics probably 6 months before a general election. They go, oh, let's have a look and see see the landscape and see like what we should and shouldn't be voting for. Then they might, then they'll just vote, or they vote who their mates are going to vote for, or they don't really understand the effect of what goes into, like I say, an election campaign to getting a point. And ultimately, it just comes down to the block vote. And that's all. That's what Labour are doing. They're appeasing themselves to, the block, the voting block, and that is it. We've seen what happened with the Green Party, Gorton.
Yeah, Gorton
Denton, and obviously the Greens won. The Reform are very disappointed. I know they put in an appeal for an investigation regarding vote rigging and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll win that. But I wouldn't argue that there's probably the family voting thing has been going on. I watched some interesting things about that, and postal voting as well. People buy votes. It's been going on for years and years.
But with the family voting thing, it's like married women generally vote the same way as their husbands.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, what's the big?
I hear that.
Yeah, what's the big problem?
I do hear that, but I think it's a case because I thought the same thing. I thought, what you mean? Like, if I go down the voting polling station with, like, I don't know, say when I was a lot younger, say with my mum and dad or whatever, I can't. But no, it's because they're basically going in the same booth and they're basically telling them to vote for this and that one. I mean, we did see, I think, some miscounting as well and stuff like that. Last local elections last year. So there's a lot. I think that part of it as well, the polling, that all needs to be sorted out as well. I mean, it's not very. If it's open for manipulation, then it needs to be looked at.
Well, obviously, people are frustrated with Labour and the Tories, as you say you are as well. Reform seems to be the party of choice for many people now. How do you feel about them and Nigel Farage?
Right.
Oh, so you're not convinced by Nigel Farage?
Oh, not at all. No.
Hey, why?
So if we had this conversation maybe last December, I would have in 2024. That is. I would have sort of said, you know what? Yeah, this is okay. Yes, this is good, because you can see Reform started to sort of build themselves into a bit of a brand. Unfortunately, the way that they've treated a few of their politicians that they got rid of, Rupert Lowe, like Ben Habib, James Mac.
Yeah, I know the guy you mean.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
And I thought, nah, this ain't. And then since then, I've seen they went to the right, got a lot of stick for it, and I feel they've gone back to the centre because I think they've got all the Tory vote on side, and they've gone back to the centre but they're losing the right. And I think what they've done again, they've done a few little U-turns on their policy. Like when he said mass immigration or mass deportations was literally, he said it's impossible. I know in the last few weeks they've tried to sort of turn it around again, and they've had a few defections they've made as well, a little bit questionable. I mean, on them defections, I mean, Suella Braverman and Robert Jeremy, they would make sense. So people go, well, because I do think they're the Tories 2.0. That's what I think. I think they're the Tories 2.0. They've come right to the centre. I don't know what they're thinking of with that. What's his name?
Nadeem Zahawi.
Nadeem Zahawi, because him and Farage were literally fighting each other on social media probably within the last 6 months of a year ago or so, something like that.
But he's changed. He's changed his mind now.
Of course, they're just
fantastic.
they're trying to appease everyone, and I don't think if you don't go down that route, I think it's very, very dangerous. I think because you're not going to deliver what you say you're going to deliver. They said at the beginning, because if you look at what they, in the actual election, they got, was it about 2.3 million votes, something like that in total?
Yeah.
So if it was first past the post, they would have done well.
Yeah.
So they had people behind them, but now I feel that they've lost that, because I think the people, what they represented was the people on the right, and I keep saying the right, it's just the people like myself, what we want. We don't class ourselves as right or far right, and I think they've lost that, and I think over a period of time they're going to lose more and more of that. What they've said about transgender in prisons and things like that, that is all very wishy-washy. I just think that they've gone back on a lot of things.
Okay.
So I'm very, very disappointed, to say the least. I mean, if I was looking at anyone, I like what Rupert Lowe is doing. But just for the record, I'm on the fence at the minute, because I don't feel I need to align myself with any political party until I need to.
Yeah.
Although I do like what they're doing, what they're saying. I like Advance, what they're about.
Yeah.
what Ben Habib was saying. I know there's a little bit of a thing between Ben
There
and
seems
Rupert.
to be a lot of fighting between
Yeah,
Advance UK and Restore Britain.
And even with Reform, because there's a lot of people. Like, I've got friends, like, I've got friends that are at Reform. Now, I won't attack them. I'll attack the party. I've got people that, some of them even candidates. I've got no problem with them. I say good luck to you, because there's only so many candidate roles you can go for.
Yeah.
There's only so many parties. So if you want to make a career in politics, you've got to start somewhere and work your way in. It doesn't mean to say that your values might not change over time. That's why I haven't got so much of a problem with certain defections, because if their values, like the ones that I've mentioned, align with what Reform are about, then that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
But if like Labour, like unless you were like a closet Tory, that's a Labour MP. Now you've suddenly come out and you said, well, sorry, I said,
right.
now I want to, this is my true feelings, etc., etc. Then fair enough. But I do like what Restore are about. I mean, because I think with someone like Rupert, I think he says what he means, and if he don't like people and it upsets people, then he doesn't care. And I think people actually prefer that. I mean, in life we prefer boundaries, but as human beings, we like boundaries. At least you know where you stand.
Yeah.
Do
you not think the right is too divided in Britain? Like, you've got Reform are the biggest party from that side of the spectrum, and then Restore have now seemed to have leapfrogged Advance UK. But if they're fighting each other, then is this going to make way for Labour to perhaps stay in government at the next election?
That is the fear. Or you say
Or you
Labour,
get the Greens.
The Greens will
Yeah.
be. I think the Greens are the biggest threat. I think Labour and the Tories are done. I think it will be. I think the Greens could possibly end up first or second if the threat you're talking about is true.
Yeah.
And you do have a fair point. I do think though, because it's all happened. We knew like Restore was probably going to do something at some point. Obviously, Advance have come in, got their membership up, and because now Restore have come in, I think that's made Reform react as well, which is why they're trying to sort of have a harder line on certain things. I think they've had a bit of a boot up the backside. But I do think all the infighting, like I do see on X every day, I've like sort of tried to distance myself from it, because I just think we've just got to let the dust settle. We've still got another 3 years.
Yeah.
There's going to be, I think, within the next year or so, you're probably going to see potential defections from Reform to Restore. You're going to see a voter block move from Reform to Restore Britain, purely because I think, like I said at the beginning, what Reform stood for initially is what Restore is doing. If it wasn't, if Reform stuck to the guns, Advance and Restore wouldn't be needed. Do you know what I mean? But they haven't. That's why when people say about splitting the vote, it's not, because Reform stand for I believe they stand for something completely different compared to Restore and Advance to some degree.
Okay.
Yeah, completely. Because I think Restore will deliver, because I can just, by the way that the assertiveness of the only issue they've just got to continue to grow the party, fastest growing party ever in political history. Over 110,000 members in the space of 2 weeks. I know people might argue, well, they started off as a movement beforehand, but either way, we are going to see a lot of 6 months is a lot in politics.
Yeah.
And we've got another 3 years potentially, unless they do bring forward. I think Farage was had an idea maybe there might be a general election 2027. But this is where the political spectrum comes in.
Yeah.
If they see Restore growing too quick,
Yeah.
do they call an early election to stifle their growth before they get too big too quick?
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about mainstream media, because you hate us, don't you? You hate us.
I do indeed. I'm only joking. You guys are actually all right. And that's the only reason why I agreed to come on, because we speak, obviously, away from this, we speak. So, and I think with yourself, I know we've had a few little sort of conversations. You're at least you're fair. I know you probably class yourself more as a centrist.
Yeah, probably.
Centrist, any bit to the left?
I'm left on some things, and I'm further right than you on some other issues.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it depends what the topic is. Crime, I'm right. I am right. I think I say this all the time. Our regular listeners will know I say this all the time. I think if you're a paedophile, rapist, you go to jail and you're getting chemically
anything to do with children.
Yeah, go to jail, castration. Yep. That's it. So, but my liberal friends would say that I'm barbaric for having those kind of opinions.
So how would you vote then?
How would I vote?
Would you vote based on purely on policy? I know you would have to. But,
yeah.
But how would you divide it up between, if you had this, and this, and it was divided, say, 3 ways?
I would go with the party that I agree the most with. I'm never going to agree 100% with anyone, whether it's Kemi Badenoch, whether it's Farage. There's some policies that Reform have got that I think that's fantastic, like charging less tax to nurses and hospital workers. I think that's a fantastic idea. That's wonderful. They've got other policies that I think, don't agree with that. That Polanski and the Greens, I probably agree with 20% of what he says. The other 80%, I think it's a bit bonkers. I think it's a bit nuts, so they would not get my vote. If I had to vote tomorrow, I'd probably be split between voting between the Tories and Reform. If I vote
Do you think
tomorrow.
Tories have got any chance though? That's the thing.
That's the thing. Then I feel like I'm wasting my vote if I vote for someone who isn't Reform, basically.
Well, you say that to me, like asking me that question. Like this is another thing. Like if there was a general election tomorrow, I would have to vote Reform because they would be the worst, the best of the
worst option.
Yeah, the best of worst option.
Yeah.
And then you've got the likes of Restore, Advance, who keep their feet at the fire. And that's the only thing.
We've had Ben Habib on the show. Very eloquent, very nice man. I really like Ben Habib. But I don't think Advance UK have got a hell's chance of getting anywhere near government.
Unfortunately, I agree with you, and I just think whether it's down to like a branding thing, you know, and you've got the likes of even Nick Tenconi at UKIP who've been around for a long time.
Yeah,
I know he's more classed as an activist. Nick's he's a nice bloke, and people goes on about the Christian side of things too much, but I don't think that it might be it might just be the way he's perceived.
Yeah,
but he's a solid guy. But it's like, for me, when people ask me about him, I would he's only a young guy as a politician as well. He's got so many years ahead of him.
Yeah.
He's got time to change, and even, people change their values over time.
Yeah.
And where the way they position themselves. And that's fine as well. Because ultimately we all want the same thing at the end. Well, most of us do. Unless you want to be on the Greens and want to legalise drugs and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think about that then?
Legalising drugs?
Like, do you think that was just... I know there's that headline about,
Yeah, he's going to bring back the date rape drug and all this kind of stuff. They're saying he's going to legalise heroin. No. So my missus, as you know, is American. And in New York, marijuana is legal. Go and buy it from a store. I don't like walking around New York and being able to smell pot at every corner. That part I don't like. But if it means that drug dealers are losing some motivation to sell drugs, then... I think that's a good thing. Other drugs like heroin, hardcore things like that, and date rape drugs or hypno, anything like that, that should never be made legal.
No,
I think that's far too dangerous.
I know the one about educating, more the educational side of it. About how to. I disagree with that. I think we need to be educating children to deter from drugs. I know there was like a controlled drugs site. Is it in Glasgow? I think someone died there. Someone died there yesterday. Right. Heroin addict who's obviously gone there to control their whatever. Yeah. And died. So it's not nothing's foolproof. I don't think we should be condoning drugs at all. Like in terms of cannabis now, I was always against it because especially like working with kids in care, that's the first thing they go for and stuff like that. I've somewhat changed my mind on cannabis in particular, more because of the health benefits of cannabis, like specifically things like cannabis oil. So yeah, but and one of the things I try and teach the kids that I work with, for instance, like whatever you're buying, you don't know what's in it. Yeah. You don't know what's in it. Like that, you could be smoking absolutely anything. They could just tell you it's that, and it's not. So that is where the education side would sort of come into it. Not that you want them to have it, but obviously people will get hold of it either way. Absolutely. But apart from the cannabis for the health benefit side of it, which I'm a bit of an advocate for, I think everything else, I just don't think we should be entertaining it. The moment we start talking about it and sort of promoting it in any way, I think isn't a good thing.
Well, Martin, you've done a wonderful pivot there. Because I asked you,
I know,
why don't you trust the mainstream media? And here we are talking about cannabis.
I think what it is, and I spoke to someone about this the other day as well. And people might say, well, I speak from the right hand side, so I'm biased. When I thought about that, I thought, yeah, I am, because I think, for instance, like the BBC, I think they are a left-wing propaganda machine used by the government. That is it. For them, for instance, I've seen stuff that ITV have done. I've seen the stuff that Channel 4 have done. All part of the same machine. Maybe Channel 4, I don't know. I don't really concentrate on Channel 5, for instance. But I've seen it. I've seen what they've done to other citizen journalists, smear campaigns. Like, that tells you that they're worried. Because why would you go out of your way to do a smear campaign on citizen journalists, which in fact done the complete opposite, right? it's about telling the truth. Look what the BBC done to Donald Trump, whether you love him or hate him.
Yeah.
You know, look what they done. Where they had to. How many accounts of misinformation was given about reporting on Israel and Gaza?
Yeah.
Yeah. So all this is misinformation. Whenever I look on the BBC website, for instance, I refer to it because I want to see what they're not reporting on. It's not what it's that is a point though. It's not
Yeah.
what they don't report on. You know, and it's. And then you've got so basically you've got like this left wing propaganda, and now they're encouraging schools to utilise the likes of the BBC for variable sources. They, why do you think Keir Starmer wants to try and shut down X? He keeps saying this whole thing is completely against. He's trying to shut down free speech. I know everyone on X is probably against Starmer, and he doesn't probably like waking up to the memes and the things that are said about him. But that's on him because he shouldn't be the way he is. Don't get me wrong. I think things like, say, if you want to talk about X, should be need to be managed in a certain way. We've seen certain things, and that's fine. They're working on certain things because anything, again, if it's anything to do with exploiting children, it's completely wrong. But yeah, if you want to do that, if you're really doing it for children, to safeguard children, what about the other apps? You should be taking down Snapchat for a start. What about apps like the kids play on, like, I don't know, Roblox, where they've got rooms for grooming rooms? Yeah, Snapchat is the worst one out of a lot of them. We don't hear a peep about them. Why are you not shutting down other platforms? It's always about X because obviously X are deemed as, say, right wing, if you want to call it that or whatever. Depends on your algorithm, I suppose. But regards to the mainstream media, it's like I honestly I see just a completely different angle on everything they report, and because like the likes of, I suppose young people don't really watch TV anymore, but say like the likes of my parents, that generation, still sit in front of a TV every night. And I go around to my parents. I say, "Oh, did you see what happened? Did you see this? Did you see that?" And I'm like, "No, you didn't. You haven't read both sides of the story." Then at least if I give them my story, okay, it might be the other side, but at least then if you've got two sides of the argument, you can then make an informative decision. But when it's been drummed down you for so many years, people will, and it does persuade people on how they vote and how they've got certain views on certain topics. And I think it's unfair, which is again why citizen journalism is on the rise. Anyone can be a citizen journalist. All you need is a mobile phone. I do believe there should be some sort of, when I say moral code, I think we should self-regulate in terms of we should manage ourselves. Like, just don't be any Tom, Dick and Harry filming anything for the sake of it. And, just try and, just think about it as what you're filming, because I got asked this about, if there was like something happening or someone, it depends. If you're doing it for educational purposes, like someone may be getting stabbed or something like that, be careful. Don't just put the post out there because you want to get an extra 100,000 likes or views.
It sounds like you're just talking about being a journalist then, mate. Yeah, we've got these moral obligations we have to follow. There's rules that we have to adhere by, and we know what we can and can't report from courts. So
But I don't think we should be. But I don't think we should be have a regulation. Like when people so when I go to these protests, you get the police. Oh, have you got say your press? Don't need a press pass. You do not need a press pass to film, as long as you're not interfering with the police and the job that they're doing. That's a load of nonsense. That's a load of tosh. So whenever they say that, and this is what this. So I deliberately do not have ID on me because I don't mind. Only because it gets my back up. Right, and it's not to create anything.
Yeah, but the immigrants haven't got IDs either.
Exactly. They throw them overboard when they're coming over on these small boats. Yet they get 4-star treatment.
Right, Martin, final question, mate. If you could sit down with Starmer just for 10 minutes, what would you say to him?
Oh my God. That is I don't think I'd be able to control myself with the expletives. And that is the God's honest truth. I would tear into him like a child. Because I don't think he's done anything like positive, anything that there's nothing that man could say to convince me of anything else. He comes out with one thing, even if you look at his pre-elected videos, the things that he was saying, whatever you're going to do, make sure you don't BS us, don't this, that. I mean, it's like he said, I would ask him about Peter Mandelson, for instance. I'll be like, well, you bragged on about strengthening the ministerial code, right? You said it 3 times in an interview with the ITV.
Yeah.
Right? So why have you not referred yourself then over the handling of that?
That's a very good point.
He's very hypocritical, and all these U-turns that he's done. But if I was to sit down with him, I'd have to bring a list. I think we'd be here all day. He's not on my Christmas card list, put it that way.
Oh, Martin Gauci, thank you very much, mate.
Thank you, JJ,
pleasure.
mate. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.
Gauci Reports, you can find him on X and Instagram as Gauci Reports. We'll put a link in the description for you. Hopefully you've enjoyed this episode talking to the everyman. Let us know what you think. Let us know your comments. Leave them below. Also, like, share, subscribe, and hit the hype button so more people get to watch this kind of content. Bye-bye.